A 14-year-old boy stopped a $35 million jet from taking off, using nothing but his eyes and his courage. No one believed him. No one listened. But if he had stayed silent that day, many lives would have been lost. In this video, you'll hear a story that's almost too unbelievable to be true. A regular boy who dared to run across a runway to save a millionaire from an assassination plot. A journey that unveils the hidden truth behind the death of the father he always admired. And finally, a legacy reborn, from loss, from tears, but carrying within it hope and light. Stay until the end, because you just might find a piece of yourself in this journey. That day the sun was blazing. On the runway of a small rural airport in Oregon, the ground shimmered like a sheet of glass under fire. A boy with messy hair and a dust-covered t-shirt was running like the lives of an entire flight crew depended on his legs. His name was Alex Mitchell. He shouted over the roar of jet engines, "Don't fly your plane!" Was sabotaged, waving his arms frantically, eyes wide open. He charged toward a Gulfstream G650, one of the most expensive private jets in the world, as if trying to stop it with his own body. In the distance, men in black suits began rushing toward him, faces cold and expressionless. Inside the cockpit, tech billionaire Charles Weston was fastening his seatbelt, his gaze flickering down toward the commotion on the ground. And in that exact moment, that shared glance between two strangers, a successful man and an unknown teenager, a life was saved, perhaps more than one. But what Charles couldn't have known was that the boy, Alex, didn't just save him. He also forced him to confront a long-buried death once dismissed as a technical malfunction. The death of Thomas Mitchell, Alex's father, a pilot, a devoted father, a hero the world had too quickly forgotten. So how did a 14-year-old boy know a sabotage device was hidden behind the hydraulic compartment? Why did his father, a man who once tested navigation systems for a major aerospace corporation, die just 1 week before that system was scheduled for launch? And most importantly, what could possibly drive a young boy to break the law breach, airport security, and risk everything, just to speak a single truth? Let's go back to where it all began, a place that seemed peaceful, but in truth was on the edge of a brewing storm. The sun that afternoon was relentless. Heat shimmered above the tarmac at Clayton Regional Airport, blurring the lines between sky and ground. Engines from a nearby private jet, a sleek Gulfstream G650, whined louder by the second. Its polished white fuselage gleamed like a blade under sunlight. And then, breaking that scene like a gust of wind across still water, a boy appeared. 14-year-old Alex Mitchell. His sneakers slapped against the concrete. His chest heaved with panic. His arms flailed, trying to be seen. "Stop," he screamed. "Your plane's been sabotaged." Security moved fast. 2 men in dark suits dashed toward him, mistaking his desperation for a threat. Inside the plane, tech magnate Charles Weston leaned back into buttery leather, unaware of the chaos unfolding just yards away. To the world watching, if anyone had been watching, Alex looked like a kid in the wrong place, making a mistake he'd regret. But in that one split second, Weston glanced out the window. Their eyes met. And in Alex's face, there was no mischief, no bluff. Only truth, raw and urgent. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to stop a tragedy. What happened next would shake the foundations of a billion-dollar company, reopen a case thought long buried, and launch this quiet boy from Oregon into the spotlight of national headlines. But let's pause here for a moment. Let's ask a simple question. What makes a 14-year-old run headfirst toward danger, when every adult around him looks the other way? The truth is, courage doesn't always look like it does in movies. It's not capes and slow-motion music. Sometimes courage is sweaty and scared. It's a teenage voice cracking as it pleads for someone to listen. It's a trembling hand pointing at a piece of metal no one else noticed. And Alex wasn't the first. Back in 2015, in a small town in Georgia, a 10-year-old named Willie Merrick was kidnapped. In the car alone with his captor, Willie did something no one expected. He sang gospel songs, non-stop for 3 hours until the man, unsettled, pulled over and let him go. Willie's story went viral not because he fought his kidnapper physically, but because he held his ground with his voice. Courage, you see, is less about muscle and more about message. Alex's message that day on the runway wasn't polished. It wasn't part of any plan. It was instinct. A gut-level scream from a kid who'd seen something wrong and decided that staying quiet wasn't an option. Before he was the boy running across the runway, before the headlines and FBI agents and life-changing revelations, Alex Mitchell was just a kid who loved planes. Not in a sometimes I look up at the sky kind of way. No, this was the kind of love that fills your room, your notebooks, and your dreams. Step into his bedroom and you'd know exactly what we mean. Hanging from the ceiling, suspended on fishing lines, were delicate model airplanes, some missing wings, others with paint scraped off from too much handling. The walls lined with dog-eared issues of Air and Space Flying, and even old instruction manuals Alex had begged from the local aviation shop. And on his desk, beneath the clutter of wires, screwdrivers, and duct tape, sat a project that had consumed his weekends for over a year. A homemade radio scanner patched together from secondhand parts scraps and sheer determination. Alex wasn't just playing. He was learning, absorbing every detail like a sponge in a thunderstorm, from radio frequencies to hydraulic systems to the way air moved over a wing. His father, Thomas Mitchell, had been a pilot, and though he was gone, his spirit lived on in everything Alex touched. Every day after school, Alex would time the takeoffs at Clayton Regional Airport. He could tell the difference between a Cessna and a Piper just by the whine of the propeller. He knew which planes took off at what time, and he'd log it, just like his dad used to do. It wasn't about fantasy, it was discipline, pattern recognition, awareness, memory, skills we usually associate with professionals. But in Alex's world, it was second nature. And it's here that we uncover something profound. What others called a weird obsession turned out to be his greatest asset. There's a story in psychology about how expertise isn't always about formal training, but about the number of hours someone willingly spends immersed in a subject. By age 14, Alex had spent thousands of hours thinking about flight, how it works, how it fails, and how it feels to be in control of something that defies gravity. So when he walked past the back of that Gulfstream jet and saw a panel that didn't sit quite right, when most people would have ignored it, he paused. Because something didn't fit. The alignment was off. The screws weren't flush. There was a blinking red light, subtle but there. And Alex had seen this before, not in real life, but in a diagram his father once showed him. If you ever see a light like this where it doesn't belong, his dad had said you pull the checklist, then you pull someone aside, and you don't let that plane take off. Thomas was half joking at the time. He never imagined that warning would someday save a life, let alone his son's life. And this is where the line blurs between obsession and expertise. Because Alex wasn't just lucky. He was ready in the quiet, unnoticed way that kids often are when the world underestimates them. There's a beautiful lesson tucked in there. The things you love, especially the ones no one else understands, might someday become the very thing that makes you invaluable. So if you're the kid who takes apart old radios, the teen who can name every bird in your backyard, or the adult who still sketches cars on napkins during lunch, don't dismiss it. Don't rush to be normal. Because what you see might just save a life. And for Alex, it did. Because his passion didn't just alert him to a problem, it gave him the courage to act. But the story doesn't end there. You see the plane he stopped. It wasn't just any jet. It belonged to one of the most powerful men in the aviation tech industry. And once that man stepped off the stairs and met Alex face to face, the boy with models in his room suddenly found himself at the center of something far more dangerous and personal than he ever imagined. Alex had always loved the quiet hum of an airport in the late afternoon, the way shadows stretched long over the tarmac, the rhythmic clinking of tools in the hangar, the smell of aviation fuel mixed with warm concrete in summer air. It was familiar, comforting. And that day, after slipping through the fence behind the airport's maintenance, shed his little secret since he was 10, Alex was just hoping for a closer look at the sleek Gulfstream jet that had landed that morning. He'd never seen one in person before. $35 million. Mach 0.9205. 7,000 nautical mile range. He knew every spec by heart. But as he moved slowly along the fuselage, staying in the shadows, like he'd always done, something felt off. Near the tail, a small access panel sat slightly ajar, barely noticeable. But Alex noticed. Because maintenance panels weren't supposed to look like that. He'd helped clean and check enough of them with Frank, the old mechanic who'd once flown with his dad, to know that precision mattered. Panels clicked. They sealed. Always. Alex glanced around. No one nearby. Curiosity tugged at him harder than caution. He crouched, gently opened the panel, and his heart dropped. Inside was a small, unfamiliar device attached to the hydraulic control lines. It looked like nothing he'd ever seen on a schematic. It had a blinking red light, a cluster of wires wrapped around the tubing, and what looked like a tiny timer screen. "No way," he whispered. It didn't take a trained technician to know this didn't belong. You see, the hydraulic system in aircraft, like the Gulfstream, isn't just important, it's critical. It powers the flaps, landing gear, rudder brakes, everything that makes takeoff and landing possible. Tamper with it, and you risk losing control midair. Let's pause here, because some might wonder, couldn't this just be a maintenance tool or some sensor? And that's a fair question. But Alex had spent years learning these systems. He knew where sensors were supposed to be. He knew which cables were color-coded for hydraulic flow. And most importantly, he knew that anything with a timer and a blinking red light didn't belong anywhere near flight controls. In 1989, United Airlines Flight 232 lost its hydraulic system mid-flight due to engine failure. Pilots had to land the plane with no control surfaces, using only thrust from the engines. They saved 185 people, but 111 still died. Hydraulic failure isn't just a malfunction, it's a nightmare. And here Alex was staring at a device designed to cause it on purpose. In that moment, a boy with no badge and no official role became the only thing standing between 10 people and disaster. He closed the panel carefully, backed away. His mind raced. He knew security wouldn't believe him. He knew he technically wasn't even supposed to be on the tarmac. And yet he also knew if he said nothing, that plane would take off, the device would activate, and it might never land again. That's the thing about noticing details others miss. It's not always convenient. It doesn't make you popular. But sometimes it's what makes all the difference. If something doesn't look right, say something. It's a rule in aviation safety. And on that day, Alex lived by it. We often think that power belongs to the loudest voice, the biggest title, the person with the most letters after their name. But here's a different truth. Sometimes the person who saves the day is the one who simply sees what no one else did and refuses to stay silent. But even as Alex tried to figure out what to do next, the situation was already changing. A group of men in suits was approaching the plane, and in the center of them was Charles Weston, founder and CEO of Weston Navigation Technologies, the man whose company helped guide everything from private jets to military drones. The man who was about to board a sabotage plane. Alex had minutes, maybe less. Whatever he was going to do, he had to do it now. It's easy to imagine a different version of the story, one where Alex keeps walking, says nothing, one where the jet lifts off into the blue sky, and somewhere over the mountains, tragedy strikes. The headline wouldn't be about a hero. It would be about a mysterious accident. A billionaire lost. A crew gone without warning. But that's not the story we're telling today. Sometimes being brave means risking looking foolish. It means breaking the rules when following them could cost lives. And it means believing even for a moment that your voice matters no matter how young you are. And Alex's voice did matter, because what he saw on that plane was something even trained professionals had missed. But how did a 14-year-old kid with no badge, no authority, and no official training spot a sabotage device that experts overlooked? Well, that answer lies not on the runway, but in a small bedroom just 2 miles away. A room full of aviation magazines, a half-built radio scanner, and the legacy of a father who once dreamed of the sky. Alex didn't think. He ran. Across open tarmac, past security cones, into the deafening roar of turbine engines that shook the ground beneath his feet. His heart pounded like a war drum. "Mr. Weston," he screamed, waving both arms. "Your plane's been sabotaged. You can't fly." But the engines were already warming. The boarding stairs were starting to retract. And the people who heard him first weren't listening. Two security guards rushed forward, hands out, expressions hardening. One grabbed Alex by the arm, spinning him around. "What are you doing here, kid? You can't be." "There's a device," Alex shouted, struggling. "In the hydraulic panel. I saw it. I know planes. My dad was a pilot. It's not supposed to be there." They didn't budge. "You're trespassing," one muttered. Let's call this in. That's when a voice cut through the noise. Wait. Standing a few feet away, freshly descended from the jet's stairs, was Charles Weston himself. Tall, silver-haired, calm, but clearly curious. He looked straight at Alex. What did you say? Alex met his gaze, chest heaving. Your plane's been tampered with. There's something in the rear hydraulic access panel. A blinking light. A timer. It's not standard. Please, I'll just check it. There was a long pause. Weston's security detail exchanged glances. One stepped forward. It's just a kid, sir. Probably messing around. But Weston didn't move. Something in Alex's voice, his urgency, his certainty, held his attention. What's your name? He asked. Alex Mitchell. Weston blinked. Any relation to Thomas Mitchell? Alex nodded. He was my dad. You could feel the shift in the air. Because Weston remembered Thomas, a sharp, principled test pilot who'd once consulted for Weston's company. They hadn't known each other well, but well enough to respect each other. And now here was Thomas's son, begging him to pause, not for attention, not for fame, but for safety. Weston turned to his chief of security. Take a mechanic. Check the panel, right now. It took less than 5 minutes, but it changed everything. The mechanic came back pale, the guard beside him silent. He's right, the man said. There's a device, remote triggered, tied into the hydraulic controls. Could have caused total failure during flight. Weston stared at Alex, then quietly turned to his staff. Call the police and the FBI. That moment frozen in time was when a trespasser became a hero. Let's pause here for a second, because we live in a world where it's easy to assume you need status to be taken seriously. Titles, degrees, age, access. But what Alex teaches us is this. When you know something's wrong, when the facts are clear and the risk is real, speak up anyway, even if no one's ready to hear it. In 1986, Roger Boisjoli, an engineer at Morton Thiokol, warned NASA about a flaw in the Challenger shuttle's O-ring seals. He predicted a catastrophic failure in cold temperatures. His concerns were dismissed. The shuttle exploded. 7 lives were lost. Boisjoli didn't save the crew, but he spoke the truth before the world was ready to hear it. Alex, he got there just in time. Later that day, after hours of interviews, signatures and thank yous, Weston pulled Alex aside. You saved my life, he said simply. And more than that, you saw what trained professionals didn't. That says something. Alex didn't know what to say. He just nodded, because deep down he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a kid who got lucky. But Weston knew better. Your father would be proud, he added. And in Alex's chest, something unspoken shifted. Not just pride, but the sudden possibility that maybe this wasn't all just chance. Maybe it was connected, because Weston hadn't forgotten Thomas Mitchell's own death 5 years earlier. A crash, ruled mechanical failure. But with what Alex had uncovered, Weston began to wonder. What if it hadn't been an accident? That quiet question, that whisper of doubt, would soon unravel secrets buried for years. Secrets about a powerful company, a controversial navigation system, and a man who had tried to tell the truth no matter the cost. That evening, as the sun dipped below the Oregon hills, Alex sat silently in a conference room, the weight of the day pressing on his shoulders. FBI agents came and went. Reporters waited outside. His mom clutched his hand like she might lose him too. But in the quiet moments between questions, Alex couldn't stop thinking about one thing. His dad. Thomas Mitchell had been more than a father. He was a pilot, a mentor, a man who taught Alex to think clearly, to question, to trust his instincts, especially when something didn't feel right. 5 years ago, Thomas had died in a plane crash. The report called it mechanical failure, a tragic fluke accident. No one was blamed. No one looked closer. But now, with everything Alex had just uncovered, that story didn't sit right anymore. And Charles Weston agreed. Later that night, in a quiet corner of the airport lounge, Weston sat down across from Alex and his mother. His tone was different now, less formal, more personal. I need to tell you something, he said gently. 5 years ago, your dad was testing a prototype for us, a new navigation system codenamed Navis. It was groundbreaking. Satellite-accurate positioning, millimeter precision. Military interest was huge. Alex listened closely. His mom held her breath. But just before the crash, your dad raised concerns. He found irregularities in the way the system responded under certain conditions, especially during bad weather and mountainous terrain. It was a red flag. Weston paused, looked down. The problem is, I never saw the report. It disappeared. So did the prototype. And after your father's accident, everything was blamed on him. Quietly, Alex stared at the floor, his hands clenched. So what are you saying? He asked softly. I'm saying, I think your father was right, and I think someone inside my company wanted to silence him before he could make those concerns public. Let that sink in. A man dies trying to protect the integrity of a flight system. The evidence disappears. And 5 years later, his son uncovers the same kind of sabotage on the same company's jet. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. In 2003, Cliff Baxter, a former executive at Enron, was found dead after raising alarms internally about financial fraud. Though ruled a suicide, the timing and the information he held cast long shadows. Corporate secrets don't always stay buried. Sometimes they come back carried by those who love the ones who tried to speak up. Alex's mom, Sarah, sat frozen. Why didn't you come to us? She asked Weston, her voice cracking. Why now? Because I didn't know who I could trust, Weston said honestly. But when your son ran onto that runway today, risking everything to stop a disaster, I saw something in him, something I saw in your husband, courage, he added, and truth. The lesson here is subtle but strong. Sometimes legacy doesn't live in plaques or awards. It lives in values, in children who carry on unfinished stories, in people who keep asking the questions others stopped asking. Thomas Mitchell didn't set out to be a whistleblower. He was just doing his job. But in a world that often rewards silence, doing your job with integrity is a radical act. And now Alex was carrying that forward without even realizing it. I want to help you, Weston said finally. I want to find out what really happened. And if your father left behind anything, notes, drives, backups, we need to see it. Alex looked at his mom. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. There might be something, she whispered. He told me once, if anything ever happened to him, there was a box, a deposit box. Suddenly, the next step in this story wasn't about jet fuel or sabotage. It was about a quiet legacy locked away in a metal vault waiting for the right moment to be opened, waiting for a son brave enough to chase the truth. The next afternoon, the air felt heavier, not because of weather, but because Alex and his mother Sarah were on their way to open a door that had stayed shut for 5 years, a door Thomas Mitchell had quietly locked before his final flight. The Clayton National Bank was quiet when they arrived. Not the kind of place where big things happen. Just beige walls, low ceilings, a faint smell of paper and old carpet. But behind a thick steel door down a hallway where whispers felt too loud sat a box. Box, Uriwell 73. Sarah hadn't touched it since the day she moved it there. Her hands trembled slightly as she slid the key in. He said to wait until Alex was old enough, she whispered, until he could understand. The lock gave a soft click. The lid creaked open. Inside, they found 3 things. A hard drive in a rugged case, a small black notebook, edges worn with time, and a sealed envelope with one name written in familiar handwriting for Alex. There are moments in life that change your understanding of someone you love. Moments that remind you they had a world beyond you. Thoughts they never spoke, choices they made quietly. This was one of those moments. Alex held the letter in both hands. The paper smelled faintly of engine oil and the cedar drawer it had lived in. He opened it. Dear Alex, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. I'm so sorry, son. I wanted more time, more flights together, more sunsets from the cockpit. But something's gone wrong and I need you to know the truth. I've been testing a new navigation system for Weston Technologies. It's supposed to revolutionize private aviation, pinpoint accuracy, seamless routing, real-time adaptation. But I found a flaw, a dangerous one. Under certain atmospheric conditions, it feeds false data to the autopilot. Planes could veer off course, into terrain, into storms. It's rare but possible, and that's enough to get people killed. I reported it. I was told to keep quiet. Then someone tampered with my flight logs. When I pushed back, they offered money. I said no. Yesterday, I got a warning, an anonymous call. They told me not to fly tomorrow, but I have to. I can't walk away from the truth. If anything happens to me, give the enclosed drive to Charles Weston. Not his board, not his lawyers. Him. I trust he'll do the right thing if he sees the whole picture. And you, Alex, you are braver than you know, smarter than you realize, and stronger than you feel. I love you always. Dad. When the letter ended, Alex didn't speak. Neither did his mother. She just reached over and gently closed her hand around his. Inside the notebook were sketches, diagrams, and shorthand entries, flight tests, anomalies, GPS drift logs, and failed simulation screenshots. The hard drive password protected, but Sarah remembered the passphrase. His favorite call sign, she said with a faint smile. Fox Echo 9. In 2010, an engineer at Toyota named Hiroshi Watanabe uncovered evidence that internal safety complaints about faulty accelerators had been hidden. The documents he helped preserve later contributed to one of the largest recalls in auto history. He wasn't famous, but his data saved lives. Thomas Mitchell had done the same. He just didn't live to see it. Alex leaned back in his chair, the hard drive in his lap. He knew he whispered. He knew they might come after him. And he told the truth anyway, Sarah replied, because he believed someone would finish what he started. They looked at each other. It wasn't just about stopping a sabotage anymore. It was about restoring a name, finishing a legacy. That evening, Alex called Charles Weston. He told him everything. The letter, the drive, the notebook, and Weston, to his credit, listened quietly, seriously. Let's meet tomorrow, he said. There's more going on here than either of us realized, but someone else was listening too. Because less than an hour later, Alex's secure phone buzzed with a new message. Meet me at Hangar B, 5:30 p.m., come alone. Important. C to W, but Alex had just spoken to Charles Weston, and he'd never mentioned Hangar B, or that time, or coming alone. Alex stared at the screen, a knot forming in his chest. Mom, I don't think that message came from him. The next afternoon, Alex stood by the living room window, clutching the secure phone in his hand. The message was still glowing on the screen. Meet me at Hangar B, 5:30 p.m. Come alone. Important. CW. At first glance, it seemed legit. Same initials, same tone. But something didn't sit right. Charles Weston was a careful man. He had just told Alex they'd meet the next morning, not today. He had never once asked Alex to come alone. And most importantly, he knew Sarah Alex's mom would never allow it. Something about this felt like a trap. So Alex did what his dad would have done. He checked. He picked up his regular phone and dialed someone he trusted. Captain Jim Reynolds, the retired pilot who had flown with Thomas and now helped mentor Alex during flight lessons. When Reynolds picked up, Alex explained everything. The message, the timing, the unease. There was silence on the line. Then Reynolds said, "That's not Charles. I just spoke with him. He flew to Seattle this morning for a board meeting. Stay home. I'll call the FBI." Alex's chest tightened. It was a trap. Less than 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into their quiet suburban street. It parked and waited. Then a second vehicle appeared behind their driveway, boxing them in. Inside the house, Sarah instinctively pulled Alex back from the window. "Get the drive," she whispered. Two men in dark suits stepped out. Calm, professional, cold. One tapped on the car window with the back of a gloved hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell, please step outside." Mr. Reeves would like a word. Victor Reeves, the chief operating officer of Weston Technologies. The man who just days ago had dismissed Alex with a smile that never reached his eyes. The man who stood to inherit the company if something happened to Charles Weston. They didn't make it to the police station that day. Instead, they were ushered into a side entrance at the abandoned Hangar B on the far edge of the airport where no cameras worked and no staff wandered. Inside the cold steel hangar, Victor Reeves stood waiting. Immaculate suit, tightly knotted tie, a smile as precise as it was menacing. On a fold-out table before him lay a laptop, a flash drive reader, and the fireproof case Alex had been holding just minutes before. "So predictable," Reeves said calmly, almost amused. "Your father had the same sense of righteousness. Thought truth would protect him. Turns out it didn't." He opened the laptop and inserted the drive. Files began populating the screen. Flight test logs, error simulations. Audio notes. This is quite the insurance policy, Reeves said, scrolling. Too bad it won't leave this room. Sarah stepped forward, voice trembling but fierce. You threatened my son. You killed my husband. What are you going to do, bury us too? Reeves looked almost offended. No, I'm not a monster, just a businessman. But let's be honest, your husband was in the way. So are you. Let's pause here for a moment. Because this is the point in the story where things feel hopeless, where good people get cornered, where the truth is in reach but power tries to snatch it away. It's happened before. In 1995, Jeffrey Wigan, a whistleblower at a major tobacco company, exposed how nicotine was being chemically enhanced to make cigarettes more addictive. The company tried to ruin his life. Lawsuits, surveillance, threats. But he didn't back down. And the truth eventually made it out. Wigan once said, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the judgment that something else is more important. For Thomas Mitchell, that something else was safety. For Alex and his mom in that cold hangar, it was justice. And just when it seemed like Reeves had won, when the files were in his hands and the doors were locked tight, a rumble filled the air. Engines, voices, and the sharp command of someone used to being obeyed. Federal agents' hands where we can see them. The doors burst open. FBI agents stormed in weapons raised. And right behind them, Charles Weston. Alive, very much aware, and no longer unsure. Victor Reeves froze, his carefully composed world shattering in real time. Weston stepped forward, eyes burning. You orchestrated all of it, he said. You buried the reports. You silenced Thomas. You almost killed me. And now you came for his son. Reeves said nothing, because what could he say? The laptop was still open. The files still displayed. The evidence the legacy Thomas had died to protect was finally in the light. Truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. You can bury it for a while, but sooner or later it rises, carried by the voices of those brave enough to speak it and strong enough to keep going. Alex didn't feel victorious, just relieved. The danger was over, for now. Oh, but the story wasn't finished yet, because once the truth comes out, it's not enough to expose it. You have to do something with it. The hangar was suddenly full of light. Red and blue strobes flickered across the cold metal walls. Agents in navy jackets with bold yellow FBI lettering moved with purpose, calm, quick, and unshakable. Victor Reeves stood still, hands slowly rising, a man whose plans had finally run out of runway. And just behind the agent, stepping through the open hangar door, like the storm had cleared, was Charles Weston. He didn't say much, didn't need to. His eyes found Alex, then Sarah, and for the first time in days, they all allowed themselves to breathe. The next few hours were a blur. Statements were taken. Evidence was sealed. The laptop, the notebook, the hard drive, all safely in the hands of federal agents now. And Victor Reeves handcuffed, silent. No longer the man behind the curtain, but the man on record, facing charges for conspiracy, sabotage, attempted murder, and possibly more. Back at the FBI field office, Weston sat across from Alex and Sarah at a plain wooden table. The tired lines on his face said he'd aged 10 years in one day. But his voice was clear. The Bureau found matching components from the sabotage device in Reeves's private lab, he said. They also uncovered internal emails he'd deleted, communications about covering up test data, tampering with logs, redirecting safety concerns. He's finished. Alex nodded, slowly absorbing it. Will they be able to prove he killed my dad? Weston hesitated. The crash was 5 years ago. No surveillance, no witnesses. But with what you found and what your dad left behind, the investigation's being reopened. And this time we have more than assumptions. We have intent. It's worth noting corporate crime is rarely dramatic. It's not car chases or villains in shadowy rooms. It's paper trails, emails, lab records, expense reports. The quiet details that reveal something far louder, a pattern of choices made in the dark. In 2001, executives at Enron shredded thousands of documents to cover up accounting fraud. It took years, but when the truth came out, the company collapsed, one of the largest bankruptcies in U.S. history. Why? Because when profit is put above people, even the biggest names fall, and that's what Alex helped stop. At 14, Sarah sat quietly watching her son. He wasn't fidgeting anymore. He wasn't afraid. Something had shifted, not because the danger was gone, but because the truth had come to light and he had been part of it. So what now, Alex asked. Does it all just go away? No, Weston replied. It gets harder before it gets better. The company's going to face lawsuits, public questions, maybe investors pulling out. But I made a decision. He pulled a folded document from his briefcase. We're releasing everything. The emails, the logs, the reports your dad wrote. His story deserves to be public. He looked directly at Alex. And so does yours. Let's take a moment here, because this is bigger than just one boy or one company. This is about what happens when truth meets resistance and doesn't back down. It's about legacy and accountability, and the idea that a corporation isn't just buildings and products, it's people. People who must be held responsible for the lives they affect. Weston leaned back, then added something softer. We'll also be creating something else. The Thomas Mitchell Fellowship. Full scholarships for young pilots who want to study aviation safety. Your father's name will be on every certificate. Sarah's eyes welled up. Alex didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Because in that moment, the boy who once built model planes from scraps had helped reshape the future of aviation. And yet, even with the truth revealed, the files safe and the danger behind them, Alex knew the story wasn't over. Because a legacy restored is just the beginning. What you do with it next is what matters most. A week later, the sky above Seattle was clear. The courtyard at Weston Innovations HQ had been transformed. Rows of white folding chairs stretched across the lawn. A podium stood at the front flanked by two flags, one American one with the Weston Company logo. But no one looked at the flags. All eyes were on a bronze plaque freshly mounted on a stone pedestal. It read, "In memory of Thomas Mitchell, pilot engineer, truth teller. He believes safety should never be sacrificed for speed, silence, or profit." That day, Charles Weston stood in front of the crowd, not as a CEO trying to save face, but as a man trying to set things right. His voice wasn't polished, it cracked once or twice, but it was sincere. "We failed Thomas Mitchell," he said, "and by extension, we almost failed you all. The system we trusted was compromised not by a machine, but by a man, someone who chose silence and power over truth and people." He paused, letting the silence speak. "But today we choose differently." He announced the official launch of the Mitchell Center for Aviation Safety, an independent unit focused on testing transparency and ethical design in flight navigation, one that would never bury red flags no matter the cost. He also introduced the Thomas Mitchell Fellowship, a full scholarship for aspiring young pilots, especially those from working-class backgrounds, people like Thomas and Alex. It wasn't just corporate PR, it was personal. Because in the front row sat Sarah Mitchell Widowner's mother, and next to her, Alex dressed simply in a collared shirt and his father's old flight jacket. Worn leather, frayed collar, the name T. Mitchell stitched over the heart. Throughout history, legacies have often been restored not by grand gestures, but by everyday people who refuse to let a name be forgotten. Like the Tuskegee Airmen who fought prejudice to become some of the most respected pilots in U.S. history. Or Elsie McGill, the first female aircraft designer whose contributions were buried for decades until her story inspired generations of young women in engineering. Restoring a name is not just about honor, it's about possibility. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and cameras clicked, Weston pulled Alex aside. "You're the reason this all came to light," he said. "If you ever want a future here, the door's open. Finish school, come back, help us build something better." Alex smiled politely, but in truth his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't thinking about boardrooms or corner offices, he was thinking about runways. That night back home in Oregon, Alex sat at his desk, the same one cluttered with model planes and half-finished projects. Only now the radio scanner had been replaced with a shiny new student pilot logbook, his name embossed in gold. And next to it, a manila envelope Weston had quietly handed him before they parted ways. Inside, a certificate of enrollment, a class schedule, and a small note, "You've earned your wings. Let's make your dad proud." That's the beauty of legacy. It doesn't always live in stone or ceremony. Sometimes it lives in quiet determination, in the pages of a notebook, in the way a son holds his father's jacket just a little tighter before takeoff. Because a legacy restored isn't the end of a story. It's the starting line of a new one. and Alex was just getting started. The runway stretched out in front of him, long, empty, quiet. Alex sat in the left seat of a Cessna 172, the same model his dad used to fly. Only this time, he wasn't a kid peeking over the controls from the co-pilot's side. He was the pilot in command. He reached forward, hands steady, and flipped the master switch. The engine came to life with a gentle roar, and for a moment everything else faded: the FBI interviews, the late-night emails, the long, painful truth of what had happened 5 years ago. This was his moment. In the right seat sat Captain Jim Reynolds, clipboard in hand, eyes calm but focused. "Whenever you're ready, Alex." Alex exhaled, pushed the throttle, and rolled down the runway. There's something sacred about first flight, the way wheels lift from the earth, the way the ground drops away as if giving permission to rise, the way fear dissolves into wonder and then into peace. Because at that altitude, there's no noise, just wind, sky, and memory. And for Alex, it felt like coming home. After the flight, Captain Reynolds scribbled something on the clipboard and smiled. "You're good to go. Solo endorsement approved." Alex stared at the paper. It didn't feel real, but it was. He wasn't just Thomas Mitchell's son anymore. He was a pilot in his own right. In 1932, a young woman named Amelia Earhart climbed into her red Lockheed Vega and flew solo across the Atlantic. When she landed in Ireland, she changed not just aviation history, but the way girls around the world saw their futures. Legacy doesn't always come from finishing someone else's path. Sometimes it comes from taking off on your own. At home that night, Sarah made pancakes for dinner, just like she used to when Alex was little and nervous about a school test. But now the boy sitting across from her was taller, straighter. His shoulders held a quiet confidence she hadn't seen before. "I think Dad would have liked today," he said. She nodded. He would have loved it. They sat in silence a while, letting the peace settle in. No helicopters, no headlines, just home. Later in his room, Alex opened his laptop and began designing something simple. A logo, a stylized silhouette of a small plane climbing gently upward. Underneath, he typed, "Mitchell Aviation Legacy, taking flight together." He had a vision, not just to fly, but to build a community, to collect stories from others like him, to invite young dreamers to learn, share, remember, to honor the ones who came before, and inspire the ones still afraid to start. Because this wasn't just about planes anymore. It was about possibility. That's the thing no one tells you about grief. It doesn't go away. It grows with you. And if you let it, it can shape something beautiful. Alex's journey began with a scream on a runway. But it ended no. It continued with quiet hope, steady hands, and a dream carried not by tragedy, but by truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's the biggest lesson of all. You don't have to be powerful to make a difference. You just have to pay attention, speak up, hold on, and when the world tells you to stay grounded, you fly anyway. Thank you for following Alex's story. If it moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone you love, share it, tell it, carry it forward. Because like flight itself, courage doesn't stay still. It takes off.